The first rulers after the deluge were Syrians. They sat on the thrones of the most powerful kingdoms and empires we know of today. Ea himself, for example, was the first ruler of Egypt, under the name Ptah. With that, Ea's elitism was quickly re-established, where the few ruled the many. Special breeding program took place to re-establish the pure bloodlines amongst the humans, referring to the chosen few who were born after the gods had had intercourse with human females and impregnated them. These special humans were then eventually succeeding the gods on the throne of certain empire or countries. Some of these pure-blooded hybrids had mostly Aryan blood in them, while others had Syrian fathers. You could often still tell amongst both men and women who had more Syrian blood and Aryan and vice versa, because the Syrian offspring even in our days often have more body hair than those of Aryan descent. Of course, the current population is a mix of everything, but sometimes you can still see if a person has more Syrian than Aryan blood running in their veins. However, just because a person has more body hair, it doesn't mean that person is more hot-tempered, like Syrians are, and vice versa. These days it's more a cosmetic trait. Amongst the ruling elite, however, you may still find those who are more aggressive while there are others who are more strategists, Syrians versus Aryans. The bloodlines then intermarried within the clan of pure hybrids and kept the family line going. This is why the presidents of the United States are all cousins, third cousins, ninth cousin, etc. Researchers who have followed their bloodlines back far enough have noticed that, strangely enough, all these men of power seem to be related somehow. It is not so strange if we know how it was done. The aliens thought that if a person was of their blood, they were for more than the rest of humanity and could rule and control them on behalf of the gods. Big mistake. The kings, pharaohs, and emperors of the world, some of them initiated in secret societies, had too much alien traits in them, and many ruled with an iron fist and started seeing their own fellow humans as more stupid and not worth anything, except being hard workers for the ruling class. Shamans and high priests were still around, but high priestesses were more uncommon, although some rulers had access to them in secret. The male high priests had now taken over the sacred rituals of fire, but couldn't come close to accomplishing what women had in the past. The priestesses who were still around and were employed by the kings, pharaohs, or the emperors, instead of leading the ceremonies, now were attending the ceremonies. There was always a high priest who started off the rituals, and the priestess/shaman, now the same thing, continued from there. The results were still quite powerful, but not as powerful as they had been before the flood. The ruling elite, however, learned how to take advantage of the goddess energies that were released in the rituals, not knowing that the gods were also present, attending the ceremonies from other dimensions, where they could accumulate these energies as well. However, there were no tribes or smaller communities anymore, where everybody could sit around a fire and let a woman of fire, a shaman, release enormous 96% energies that the whole tribe could gain from. This was something of the past, and with memories erased, almost nobody could remember those times. The ruling class became very much like the Syrian gods. It was hard to tell whether it was a human who sat on the throne, or a Syrian overlord. The hybrid rulers were often strongly opinionated, and quite intolerant of the people, with a few exceptions. Further down the line, however, when the Syrians wanted to possess those bloodlines and secretly either take over the body of the king, or just possess him and command the soul who was already in there, they found it difficult to do so, because these humans had become so self-assured and had strong personalities. They were hard to penetrate. So, it was time for EA again to do some genetic manipulation on the ruling class. Enlil wanted to dumb them down so it would be easier to penetrate them on a soul level. So from there on, Syrians in the astral could possess the ruling elite and either coexist with the human spirit, born into the body, kick the body out and take it over, or a Syrian soul could be born into the baby body of a ruling elite family. Thus, it was hard to tell, and still is, who of the men of power are humans and who are aliens. Someone says that the eyes give them away, and this is true to some extent, but they also have different energies than all humans, stronger, more intimidating, and putting themselves above others, hierarchical. The fact is that in today's societies, No matter if it's in a city or a suburban area, you have most likely passed a Syrian or other intruding alien on the street without knowing about it, because they are using human bodies just like you and I. Before I understood all this, I was wondering about James of the Wingmakers. He apparently came to Mark Hempel's house, and they sat and drank coffee while Mark interviewed him. The interview can be found at wingmakers.com. James admitted to being the CEO of the Cordium, an alien race working with 15 and other top scientists of the world. His real name, he said, is Mahunahi, and as a Cordium, he should basically be 7 to 9 feet tall. I was arguing how such a giant could fly with a commercial airline and come to Mark's house in the middle of the day without drawing attention to himself. On the other hand, James says in the interview that his DNA is very similar to that of any other human, and we wouldn't be able to notice much of a difference. Of course not. With the knowledge I now possess, I understand that James, Mahunahi, looks just like you and I. He is Spanish, allegedly born outside Barcelona, because he was born into a human body. That's often how they do it. He may be 7 to 9 feet tall on his home planet, but not while he's here on Earth. What has happened from the time of the deluge and up to the present could fill volumes of books. It would be very interesting to write them, but it's beyond the scope of these papers, which purpose are to put things in perspective so we can understand the forthcoming papers that are talking about present time and the future. These are the real important ones. The papers so far are only background material, but still very significant and necessarily to write.